Black perspectives haven't always been centered in the telling of America's story. Now, we're taking center stage. Introducing NPR's Black Stories, Black Truths, a collection of Black-led stories from NPR's podcasts. Search NPR Black Stories, Black Truths wherever you get your podcasts.
Support comes from Mercedes-Benz of Buckhead, where the power of electric meets the power of Mercedes. Introducing a lineup of electric vehicles, the EQB, the EQS sedan and SUV, the EQE sedan and SUV. The vehicles are all electric. The feeling is all Mercedes. Mercedesofbuckhead.com.
This episode of Political Breakfast was recorded just hours before state lawmakers officially headed back to work at the state capitol. We got ahead of the game and sorted through some of the issues that are likely to get attention. Welcome. This is Political Breakfast on WABE. Welcome to a new episode of Political Breakfast. We are starting the new year with some good news. We can now be heard twice a week. The podcast will be available on Tuesdays and Thursdays starting this week. So we're excited about that. And a portion of it will be heard on Morning Edition those days as well. Tharon Johnson is here, our Democratic strategist. He's pretty excited about it. Our producer, Lily Oppenheimer, she's here. She's excited about it as well. Our Republican strategist, Brian Robinson, is excited about it too. But unfortunately, Brian is not here today, which is pretty unusual, as you know. He's taking care of himself. He's not 100% this week, but he will be back soon. So, Brian, we all want you to know we miss you and we look forward to having you back. Now, when I just spoke to Brian yesterday, he said, see if you can get Ben Burnett of the Ben Burnett Show to fill in for me. So I made the call and asked Ben Burnett of the Ben Burnett Show, and he said yes. And he is here with us today. So welcome, Ben Burnett, to Political Breakfast. We are glad to have you.
It is so nice to be on with you, Tharon. I think a lot of your work. I'm a fan of the show, and I spend a lot of my time on the Dickey Broadcasting Station, Extra 106.3, and they're great to me. But to be able to come and mix it up occasionally with some people who don't feel the same way is what really excites me. I want to see how I hold water.
Oh, wow. we like to hear that. So quickly, tell us about yourself and maybe even your politics before we jump into what our state legislators should and shouldn't be doing this upcoming session.
I was smart enough in 2017 to put my name on the ballot, and I served one term, 4 years on the Alpharetta City Council. Very proud of the opportunity to do that. I love the community. I love Fulton County and Metro Atlanta. If you had to identify my politics, I am the suburban woman. When we talk about the people that the Republican Party has lost,
Tharon talks about those women all the time.
That's my favorite group.
I do not struggle with them. My demographics for my show is over 60% female. Almost entirely in that group is under the age of 45 years old. And look, as long as you don't sit there and continue to trot out conversations about guns and abortion, they are still very persuadable to the Republican Party. And I know that.
Well, let's start right there. I was going to say, what should those suburban women out there be hearing from legislators this session? Or what do you think they want to hear from our legislators this session?
In Metro Atlanta, the suburban women love to talk about the economy. They love to talk about opportunity for their children. They love to talk about the Morning in America message that still very much exists here. Sometimes that gets disconnected with having so many Republican legislators from rural parts of the state. They put people like me, who ultimately they need my vote, they need my politics, but they put some things out there all the time that are not necessarily popular to women who live in household incomes of over $100,000, who want to see certain conversations take place, and others, they get tired of listening to all the social issue battles. You've seen it all around the country in the last 3 or 4 months with Andy Beshear winning re-election in Kentucky. You know, sometimes you can have a very conservative state that's still capable of voting for Democrats, but you also see in Ohio, when they put abortion on the ballot, they're in a state that's marginally conservative, and 60% of the voters said, please quit talking about this issue. Leave it alone.
Do you find that, Tharon, in terms of the social issues, specifically abortion, that the suburban women are tired of hearing about it and tired of talking about it as well?
Well, first of all, Lisa, thank you for giving me the heads up about B-Rob. I did talk to him. And as you mentioned, he's in good spirits. He definitely hate missing this show. I mean, he looks forward to it every week, and definitely want our listeners to know that he's in good spirits. And then Ben, same to you, man. I've heard a lot of great things about your show, and Brian speaks very highly of you, and I've followed your work over the years, and so really look forward to this conversation. Lisa, I am fired up about 2024 for a couple reasons. One, it's the start of the legislative session, and as soon as we're done taping here, I'm going to be running down to the Capitol to be with these great women and men who are really ready to just kind of mix it up. But more importantly, I think there are going to be so many key issues that are going to be so important to Georgians. But to echo on Ben's point, Ben, you are my demographic, brother. If you listen to this podcast, and everyone that does, I talk about this Biden coalition. Even before President Biden became president, I said that the Democratic Party, we've got to stay laser-like focused on the disaffected, college-educated suburban women who most of the times they kind of go back and forth with their voting. But you're right. I mean, they are very, very concerned about a lot of big issues that you mentioned. The one that I would add, and I'll come back to abortion, is public safety. And you look at, particularly when it comes to public safety around children in schools. I really think that what the Biden administration is doing to really make sure that these local governments like Atlanta, where we see that crime is going down all over the country, but our mayor just, this week dominated the headlines in Atlanta about this 21% drop in homicide. And so, Lisa, yes, public safety is something that Democrats got to continue to work on. And we got to talk about how this president has made a lot of efforts towards dealing with gun safety. And, I'm all about responsible gun ownership, but also we all agree that if guns get in the wrong hands of the wrong people, bad things happen. As far as, what Ben is talking about, the abortion issue, listen, I think that we have to and this is what I did a lot during the holidays. I paid attention to a lot of what women were saying. Disaffected, college-educated, suburban white women. My sisters on the south side of Atlanta. I even went down to Savannah along the coast, and I wanted to talk to people in Effingham County, Bryan County, and Savannah. And Ben is right, Lisa. It's about the economy, and it's about jobs, and it's about making sure that many of these women in these households are able to work the jobs that they want to work. But what we're also finding is that, listen, while the economy has had over 30 months of job growth, you got to give the Biden administration some credit. We avoided a recession. This is something that many experts had predicted that we were heading towards, and it looks like, knock on wood, we're not heading in that direction. And so, look, abortion issue, he's right. It showed in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Democrats can win. I think a woman's rights to choose will do what she wants to do with her body. We have to listen to women on this issue, but it's still an issue that I think where you live in a place like Georgia, where polling shows that the majority of people, when asked a question about pro-life and abortion, many of the people who are polled, and this has come out many years, are definitely supporters of a woman's right to choose. But reproductive rights for women will be on the ballot in 2024, and it will come up in the session.
So let's talk about in general, some of the issues that may pique the interest of lawmakers. Legalized sports betting. Here it comes again. Are we going to get any movement here? Or is it just coming up because it's comfortable? Because it's come up time and time again. Ben, let's begin with you.
I think when you look at the states around Georgia, like Tennessee, North Carolina, and Florida, eventually you have to have the conversation that takes place to where you have to decide what you're in favor of. And if you're a religious conservative, sometimes you have to figure out how you want to ultimately lose and who you ultimately want to lose to. And I think that one of the things that the Republican Party is incredibly terrible at is determining their fate, because ultimately, Democrats, if they get the right set of issues that are in some sort of sports gaming or a gambling bill, are going to come around. And I don't think that the Republican Party, especially the rural Republicans who are the God and country, old school types of Republicans, necessarily want to lose to Democrats when they may see all that money ultimately go to entitlements should Georgia ever shift or change. And to me, that issue is entirely about personal responsibility, individual liberty, and freedom. And I would like to see a bipartisan coalition come together. And I think that that's what you're going to see in the bill this time, to where it could potentially pass that constitutional amendment threshold, because Tharon and I may disagree with each other on 90% of the divisive issues, but I think that we could very well both be people who are like, why can't I spend $5 betting against the Falcons who can't win?
Oh, God. Wait, we didn't talk about the Falcons. Let's quickly talk the Falcons. Sad end to a long story there, right?
Listen, and B-Rob was on, and Ben, you went there, right? So you've been listening to the podcast, because we try to stay encouraged,
try to support them, yeah.
Try to support, but no, look, I think the firing of Arthur Smith was the right thing to do. I want to applaud Rich McKay and, more importantly, Arthur Blank for 3 years. I mean, this guy had 3 years. It was 3 quick seasons, but you look at the what happened in the Saints game on Sunday. We lost to teams like Tampa and Carolina that we should have beat. So I think it's the right thing to do. We got young players. We're going to be fine. But back to sports betting. Look, I said this before. Well, in the spirit of B-Rob too. Ritter did not have a terrible game, because if he was on here, he would talk about how Desmond Ritter just turns the ball over every time. I'm trying to hold it down for him. But it's just we just don't
and growing. Yeah,
the players gave up on Arthur Smith. I think that his scheme, his ability to call the plays that he did in Tennessee, just did not sort of correlate over into Atlanta. And Ben would agree. I mean, we have all this talent in the offensive side, and our defense played well. I mean, they gave up, a bunch of points to the Saints, but, ultimately during the season, they played pretty well. But back to sports betting. So as you know, fully disclosed, Lisa, I've worked on this issue in the past. I worked on casino gambling, worked on sports betting. And the one thing that Ben said I think is so pivotal, and I'm happy to hear that he is hearing this within the Republican Party, is real. There's these legislators, these women and men got to go back to their districts, and they have a religious base there, people who just are fundamentally opposed to any forms of gambling. And I remind people, we already have gambling in the state of Georgia, and it's called the Georgia Lottery. But so you got to get those rural legislators something to go back home with. And I think a lot of that is, yes, a conversation around needs-based, but there's got to be some meat in this bill that allows them to go back to their counties and their cities and to say, hey, we're going to pass sports betting. We're going to probably get it on a constitutional amendment. Polling just showed 2 weeks ago, Lisa, that the majority of Georgians want to legalize gambling in Georgia. So I believe if it goes on a ballot in whatever year, it'll pass. But there's also this other aspect to it in that, listen, you have companies out here that now you can kind of bet, but you can't do it in a legal way. I mean, here I am, a guy who loves to bet on the Super Bowl. I am literally about to either drive to North Carolina or when I'm in D.C. this week or next week, go by MGM Grand and play some bets. I should be able to take out this device that I pay all this money for with Verizon Wireless and make these bets. But the other thing that legislators have got to do is that we got to understand that there is a negative stigma that comes along with gambling. I mean, we do know, Lisa, we talked about this, that some people, and not just Black, poor people. I mean, you have some of these rural counties across America. You have white, Hispanic, Asian people who are hard working class Americans, but they will spend their last dime and penny on gambling because it does become addictive. So we got to say, hey, look, there's got to be measures in place to try to deal with this sort of concern about the stigma that comes along with gambling. But I do believe that this is the year if two things can happen. One, you got to keep an eye on the minority caucus, the Democrats in the House particularly, but also in the Senate. Last couple times, there's been some wheeling and dealing. There were some controversial bills that came up that prevented this from happening. And the second thing is what Ben said. I'm going to be paying very, very close attention to what the rural legislators, particularly the rural leadership within the Republican Party, what they wanted the bill, what's not in the bill, what's debatable. And then we'll kind of come back in about a month or so, and I think we'll be able to kind of dictate whether this has a chance or not.
I was going to say, Ben, do you really think both sides can come together and kind of work in unison this time around regarding this issue?
There are a lot of really great states in the meritocracy that is the United States of America, and I think that we can all point to a couple of them. Georgia is by far one of the most competitive from a left versus right. And what you get when you have people, and there's not a tremendous delta in the general populace, I'm not going to say the legislature from a seats and votes perspective, But one of the things you really get is the opportunity for the best ideas and the radical moderates on both sides to say, this is what we really ultimately want to see. This is what's going to make it better. I mean, like I said, I'm sure Tharon and I disagree on a lot of things. I don't think we disagree on infrastructure, roads, bridges, things like that. I don't think we disagree on public education and the subsidy that goes in part there. But there's probably 10% of the things that I could put in a bill that he probably wouldn't like, and I could probably put up, and he could probably put 10% of things that I wouldn't care for in the bill. So part of the thing that makes America great is the fact that if you have to pass a constitutional amendment to get it done, it's going to be a better bill, and it's going to be a better bill for everybody, left and right, black and white, everybody. And I think that that's ultimately what's going to make it successful. And I'll also say that gambling and sports wagering doesn't pull on me at all. I'm very likely the guy who will never spend a dollar doing it, but I would support anybody's rights to exercise their individual liberty to go bet against the Falcons, or next year maybe bet in favor of the Falcons.
But real quick, Lisa, if I can add on one quick point that Ben made, the politics of this, and this is why in 2024 you pushed us, Lisa and Lily, and the team at WABE to take our listeners into what's really going on. Here's the truth. The Republicans got to really figure out, when do you want this on the ballot? There's an enabling legislation that allows actually constitutional formatting of betting. But then there's the constitutional amendment. If they put this on the ballot in, say, 26, right? Let's just go ahead and take it there. You know, we've seen all the articles about our current governor, Kemp, thinking about running against our current U.S. senator. If a constitutional amendment is on a ballot in 2026, there are some Republicans that believe, and some Democrats believe, that helps us, the Democrats, right? Because the majority of people who will support sports betting and legalizing gambling, if that happens as well, are people who tend to vote more democratically, right? And we've seen in Georgia, if you increase the voter turnout, that usually favors Democrats. Now, Republicans did a good job in 2022 of increasing the turnout, but they learned their lesson in 2020, so they had more of the Republicans that stay home. So the question is, when would this constitutional amendment, if it passes legislature, when will Republicans want it on the ballot? And Ben, I would ask you what you're hearing, because I think that that's been one of the big concerns about, if you pass this bill, you put it up to the people, which gives the legislators cover, right? They said, let the people decide whether they want it or not. But will it drive up Democratic turnout, or will it drive up Republican turnout?
You know, I think it depends on who you are. If John Ossoff clearly has absolutely nothing to do with the gambling and sports wagering bill in the state of Georgia, and Brian Kemp is running for a Senate seat, which I don't know that he is. I don't know that he isn't. He would certainly be able to be like, I don't necessarily love this, but I let you choose. That's the governor that I am. And if you look at the people down the stack a little bit that may want to move further up the stack, the folks like Greg Dolezal, the folks like Burt Jones, who maybe want to sit there and take a swing at running for governor, like he's backed it pretty hard already in subsequent years. You might as well put it on the ballot, even if it's even if Tharon and I want to bet in 2025. Sometimes you have to do what's politically expedient to you, and I hate to break it to the audience, but that's a very real part of the politics of the day. And I think that Burt Jones would be somebody that's a clear advantage that he would have over somebody like Kelly Loeffler and Chris Carr, who won't have the opportunity to wade in on an issue other than saying, I was supportive of this, and Burt Jones gets to turn around and say, yeah, but I did it.
The world has changed, from shifts in power to a mental health crisis. So with all this social change, how do we balance the human desire for empathy, the business need for productivity, and the hope to make an impact in our community? This is a new podcast, The Social Impact Leader. I'm Jeff Shinabarker. Join me as we explore people doing work a little different. Available every Wednesday at wabe.org/podcast or wherever you get your podcasts.
WABE.
From WABE Studios, the podcast where they read stories is a new children's storytelling podcast featuring notable Atlantans and performers reading classic and contemporary children's books. Each episode contains a story meant to entertain, inspire, and inform young listeners. No screens required. The podcast where they read stories features adaptations from both chapter books and picture books. Join us at wabe.org/stories podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts.
WABE.
Well, stay tuned here. We wait and see. This is only the beginning of a 40-day session that has seen this issue time and time again. What are some of the other issues that you think will get quite a bit of attention? There's this, I don't know, Representative Matt Reeves of Duluth expects some legislation regarding the swatting stories that we've been hearing and the legislators that have been targets of that in recent weeks. He thinks some form of legislation will get passed this session. Do we need that? Do we need that form of legislation? Tharon, I'll begin with you.
Yes. And look, as a Democrat, I'm just going to, more importantly, as a Democrat, as a Georgian, I went around to a lot of different fundraisers last week, Lisa. As you all know, we have to give these legislators checks before the session starts, because once the session starts in Georgia, you can't, fundraise. And when I went to the Senate Republican Leadership Caucus, and yes, Lisa, I went there and I was welcomed with, open arms. A lot of the Republicans were happy to see me. Some of them were a little shocked. First Lady Marty Kemp made a joke then and said, "Oh, you must be lost, or you were just having dinner nearby." And I said, "No,
that's great."
I said, "Madam First Lady, now I'm coming over to get some money to these Republicans." But when I talked to a few of the senators that were there, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, these are just to name a few people. Kay Kirkpatrick, who's a great senator who does a lot of good work. I work with her in the healthcare space. Lisa, hearing the horrifying images of her saying, "Hey, all of a sudden you wake up and it's just this SWAT team in the front of your house. Like, you have no idea what's going on." And all these legislators who are targeted, there's got to be some legislation put in place, because now I think everyone kind of got caught by surprise. And, just hearing the stories on Twitter, I think Lieutenant Governor, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, talked about it on television. And I talked to a couple senators myself who experienced this swatting. And so it's really bad. And I think that if we don't put in some legislative priorities of how you deal with it, making sure that the law enforcement have the tools they need to deal with this proactively, and when it happens, I think it will continue to happen. But yeah, it was pretty horrifying to read those stories.
Yeah, Ben, I was going to say the majority of those victims were Republicans. So what kind of story is that telling?
If I were Tharon and any of the people that he greatly supports, and today is the opening day of the session, and I am a Democrat House member, I find 4 other Democrat House members and I drop that bill, because there are things that no one should fundamentally disagree with. And I'll tell you, sitting in elected office, you get served papers all the time from getting sued over any number of planning and zoning things, and it's never fun when one police officer is outside your house delivering a lawsuit to you. It is quite another, having been somebody who has sat there and spent time with them, watched them train over time in North Fulton. Like, these guys don't play. And when there is essentially, and I think, I don't want to speak out of turn, but it's terrorism. And when you take the opportunity to put somebody potentially in harm's way, it is a bad look for absolutely everybody. And it is sad that it's happening to Republicans. I just hope that it is not indicative of who we are as a country, and I really don't think that we are. But there is no doubt, like, when you look at people, you need good people in elected office on both sides. Who in their right mind would sign up to just continue to put their family through that?
Ben, I think you're right. Listen, we got to start playing chess as Democrats, and in you saying that 4 Democrats should get together and drop that bill, I mean, that would be ideal. But, give shout out to Matt Reeves, who proactively kind of went on the record saying, "Hey, this is something I plan to do." Now, if someone would, you're right, we should actually try to, get that done. But I don't want
beat him to it.
Yeah, beat him to it. But what he did strategically, and it's the right thing to do, is to make sure that he was able to get that done. But no, I agree. I think that this is gonna be a big topic at the session.
Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, is that going to have some life this session, do you think?
Well, this is something that B-Rob talked a lot about. If he was here right now, he would say, Lisa, that this is an issue that he has worked on prior to his days in Governor Deal's office. And it was something that while he was in that office, he had to sort of run the play, being with a conservative governor who at the time, Medicaid expansion was sort of on the agenda, but it wasn't until Stacey Abrams really, decided to really amplify it in 2018 when she ran for governor, and then re-amplified it even more in 2022. So B-Rob has been saying that there's been a lot of talk, sort of evolution occurring over in the Republican Party about whether or not Medicaid expansion is the right long-term solution that's financially stable for the state of Georgia. I believe that Democrats have been on the right side of this issue for a very long time, and I think we have made the case that a lot of the challenges that we're seeing with our healthcare system, a lot of the challenges that we're seeing with just overall healthcare, particularly rural healthcare in this state, could be solved if we would fully expand Medicaid. Now, Governor Kemp has made some steps towards Medicaid expansions by providing a waiver, but many believe that that is not enough. So when you have the leadership within the Republican Party, I know Ben will tell us who some of those individuals are, sort of hint, Lisa, that there's conversations being had that may be an avenue. They're open to having a more robust conversation about what a fully expanded Medicaid Georgia would look like. I think that's very promising, not just for partisan politics to help Democrats push something that we've been pushing for a long time, but the people of Georgia deserve to know the pros and the cons of this. And if it works and it's going to help save lives and provide health care, we should do it.
Where do you think this is going to land on the radar, if it does, Ben?
There is entirely too much money down at the Capitol in 2024 for it not to see some life, and it may transpire across several different bills. And it may not be you see a lot of bills come forward the first time and not work out, and then they get dropped subsequently and they become better bills. I think this is the first time that you're going to see a genuine, authentic attempt to pass some sort of Medicaid expansion. And my big fear is that, one, there's two handfuls of states that have not done this yet, and the dollars are all allocated by the federal government. So if Georgia is not involved, it doesn't mean that the dollars aren't already spent. I understand the predisposition to not like it. I've candidly would probably fall into that camp, but I also understand, math is an exact science. If you want to repeal the Medicaid expansion, you have to repeal the overall federal law. And the Republicans in Washington, D.C. can talk a real good game against Obamacare. They're never going to do anything with it because they've had the opportunity. And so this is the law of the land today. So who do you want to be? And you've seen Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas put forward a lot more of an aggressive opportunity to put it in place. It was the communications person for President Donald Trump, and she took the swing. I think it gives a lot of conservatives cover to do it. That being said, I still don't know that I would be one of them.
Yeah. All right. A lot of state lawmakers listen to the show, so we'll see what path this and other issues take. In for Brian today, Ben Burnett of The Ben Burnett Show. It's called a podcast dedicated to the unparalleled thoughts and analysis of a straight shooter, leading others to the truth. We are so proud to have you here today. Thank you for joining us for this edition.
It's been a real honor to talk to you. I think a lot of both of you. So having the chance to sit here and fill the shoes of a guy like Brian Robinson, a giant in the game, he'll love that I said that. But to be able to,
he's smiling right now.
Oh yeah,
but
Brian.
I tell the Republicans, talking truths to you guys who, Tharon, I know you sit on the other side of the aisle, but putting forward persuadable arguments, especially where I live in North Fulton or Cherokee County and places that are becoming more affluent. If you listen to my show, I've got the message.
All right. Well, we hope to have you back one day soon. Tharon Johnson is our Democratic strategist, public affairs and government consultant, and most recently a senior advisor to the Biden Georgia campaign. Thanks, both of you, for checking in. And this is day 1 of 40. So a lot more to talk about in the coming weeks. Have a great one.
Happy session.